This is not a knock because I love Smoke. I was always a Tony Stewart fan, but Kyle's definitely in better shape than Tony Stewart ever was.
And probably had some different meals
Yeah,
before the
yeah.
actual race.
Welcome to Wait What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGee.
And I'm David Parro.
David, I don't know about you, but I didn't do any podcasts this past week. I didn't know what to do with all my free time, quite frankly. What's on your mind?
I did listen to some of the Keith Richards stuff, by the way. I took your advice. Listen to that over the nice weekends.
Did you listen to Talk is Cheap?
Yep.
That album? It's a good album. What's on your mind?
I want to talk about something that might not normally come up in this spot, but there were too many pieces of this, that some of it being my homerism. This could be a spotlight on sponsorship, but it's too early in the show to run another music bit, so we won't call it that this time. And that's the new Chicago Fire FC Stadium will be known as McDonald's Park. I'm kind of excited about that. A former employer of mine in McDonald's. And the reason I wanted to bring this up primarily, especially as a juxtaposition against what is going on with the Chicago Bears stadium situation, is that this is a $750 million project located right on the Chicago River, just west of the Loop. I think a little south of the Loop, I suppose, as well. Great location. And it's being financed through the owner, 𝘗𝘓𝘳𝘴𝘰𝘯𝘴, who is, of course, the founder of Morningstar, Chicago-based financial analytics company, and owner of Inc. magazine and Fast Company. And yes, I'm sure he is getting help from bankers, but he's doing it. And they just got sponsorship from McDonald's, one of the great companies based in the Chicago area, and had moved their headquarters to downtown some years ago after I left the company. And, we talk about on this show that sports ownership is a little different than just running other companies, or it feels like it should be, and that there's a public trust involved. And it just seems like this guy, who is from the area, interestingly, 𝘗𝘓𝘳𝘴𝘰𝘯𝘴 was actually born in Munster, Indiana, which is the town directly, I think, south of Hammond, Indiana, which is where one of the locations for the Bears' new stadium might be. But this guy's getting it done, and he focuses almost all of his philanthropic efforts in the city, even though he's been a critic of the city at times. So I just think what he's done, and hats off to Excel, who supported this sale to McDonald's. It just seems like it makes the Bears, to me, even look sillier in this whole effort. Love to get your thoughts.
He got it done, right? Like a lot of entrepreneurs, he did what it took to get it done. And so now he's got a stadium and a club that's probably going to be worth $2 billion plus when all is said and done. But it is a bit, I don't know what the cost of the proposed Bear Stadium is. I would imagine it's probably $2 billion, right? For the stadium that they're proposing, wherever eventually. And this is $750 million. So it's less than half the price, which makes financing a lot easier. Again, I go back to the point, he got it done. And it's just another proof point that MLS continues to grow and succeed and build a following for the sport of soccer here in the States. In this case, it's for that particular market.
Yeah, and I don't think either of us are necessarily against clubs and club ownership utilizing the points of leverage that they have. But what I love about what he's done is it just shows, I think, the abuse of that system, if I could say that, to instantly go to the taxpayer. And listen, the NFL teams are the prize. I mean, it does look like the Bears are going to move outside of Chicago. Even the Governor Pritzker has said that he just Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, hasn't put anything forth. So it looks like it's going to be Hammond or Arlington Heights, which at least keeps them in Illinois, even though Hammond, I think, might even be closer than Arlington Heights to the current location, because the current location of Soldier Field is a bit on the south side, right there on Lakeshore Drive, between Lakeshore Drive and the lake, south of the main part of downtown. But it's outside. It's outside of the state,
and it's going against sort of the trend, which has been to have stadiums in downtown areas.
Right. And whereas the Fires, McDonald's Park will be downtown. There will be the mixed use, development around it. I've been a little critical, not a little. I've been a lot critical of Ricketts and what they did to Wrigley, because I loved Wrigley in its old kind of seedy Wrigleyville self. I mean, I loved it. There is nothing I love doing more than going to a Cubs game and hitting the bars around Wrigley Field. And that environment has obviously changed a lot since it's developed, but I don't necessarily, I don't begrudge them for doing that. I know why they do it. Overall, it increases value. It brings more of the family aspect into it to make the Cubs that much more of a family-friendly type of environment. But it seems that's what they're doing here with the MLS franchise and Fire FC. I think the PR off of that should bode well. And the club's doing pretty well here, at this point of the season.
Yeah, I'm
excited to see it. I honestly can't wait to go. I said this when it was announced. I can't wait. I'm excited. I heard from a former colleague of mine, actually my boss for my last year at McDonald's, Jackie Woodward, who went on to various CMO roles. And she just wrote me kind of out of nowhere to ask what I thought about it. And I was excited about it. She wanted to know all the analytics. It didn't seem like something that they used to do. But it sounds like something that very much is a hometown play, and I don't know how much the franchisees put up for that, either the local market or nationally. But I'm excited about it. I'm excited that it's called McDonald's Park. I'm excited for MLS having this kind of anchor there, and I'm excited for the symbolism of what this should say to other sports, and particularly to the Bears.
Kudos to the Fire. I know we typically don't break news here as it relates to results and scores and things like that, but I'm going to make an exception. I just got this. Should I do the music? Da-na-na. Man City drew with Bournemouth. And so Arsenal is your Premier League champion this year for the first time since 2004. Other timely news as well. Pep Guardiola is leaving Man City at the end of this season. It would have been nice for the club to have sent him out with another Premier League title. That was not to be. But apparently the former Chelsea manager is going to be named, whose name escapes me right now.
Who's going to be named the next Liverpool manager?
Yeah, I don't know. But this is, if you think about it, there's an old saying, you don't want to replace the legend. You want to be the guy who replaces the legend, right? You look at Man U, and nobody has lived up to Sir Alex Ferguson since he left, 13 years ago. It took Mike Vrabel, can't say his name without laughing now, right, who came in not right immediately after Belichick. So whoever comes in to take Pep's place, it's going to have a long road to hoe.
Absolutely. And it's the same with Slot at Liverpool. I think replacing Klopp has proved, and they started out super strong and hot because the team was still intact.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, exciting, and way to break the news. Yeah. People, this is what people tune in for. No. Okay. Breaking news doesn't count. You still get another topic for your big story.
All right. So a footballer by the name of Christo Fernández, who many people might know from his role as Danny Rojas in the hit Apple TV series Ted Lasso, signed with a second division USL club, the El Paso Locomotive. So apparently he was quite a football player in his teens. He had an injury that forced him to give up the sport. Now he's come back. I know we typically do this at the beginning of the year. I will make my prediction now. They are shopping a documentary about his return to soccer.
And it'll probably be themed around his of course, tagline in the show, or his go-to line is football is life. Right. And, because part of me says he gets so many commercial gigs because of that role and the fact that he could actually play the sport, which clearly he could. And you could tell that when he during Ted Lasso episodes. It'll stick, football is life, because it's like he needs to play that much when he's probably clearing a lot of money on the acting side. and doing commercial gigs rather than playing in that at that level of football. But you're right, and kind of in line with it, as you said, a series and the success that the Welcome to Wrexham has had. I saw those guys interviewed recently on something, and that's always kind of fascinating to hear the story. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they decide to sell or bring in other investment, and what the lasting legacy will be. But man, they've played it out well so far, that's for sure. That being Rob Mack and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, worst thing that ever happened is celebrity ownership, because everybody now thinks they can do it.
Yeah, of course.
What else you got?
Well, I just want to kind of quickly touch on viewership for two reasons. One is, based on the numbers we've seen so far, I'm guessing that no matter what happens the rest of the way through these conference finals and then the NBA championship, that the numbers are going to look really, really good, because the Knicks 76ers series went extremely well for the NBA in terms of viewership, even though it was only 4 games. That opening game did super solid, and it was on NBC. And even Amazon numbers look to be pretty strong. And then we have San Antonio upsetting OKC at OKC in game 1 of their conference finals. Knicks open up tonight. We're recording on a Tuesday. This episode won't air until Thursday. But they open tonight, and I have to think that Cleveland-New York series is going to do pretty well. And then you're going to have a final of a bunch of really, really good stars. But Wemby just completely goes off last night in an overtime, an unbelievably dramatic game. He hits a Caitlin Clark 3. Everyone's calling it a Steph Curry 3. It was a Caitlin Clark 3.
Yeah, it was
to tie the game in an absolute clutch moment. The fact that a dude that big is just pulling up from the logo and dropping it like it was nothing was just amazing. So the Wemby highlights are just a blast to watch. So the numbers continue to be good
that nobody has ever done. I mean, he's got a lot of career left, but he shoots like Steph. He blocks like Russell.
He
handles the ball like Harden.
Well, I don't know about that.
That was a bit of a stretch.
But if I recall, Tim, when he first broke on, I think we predicted great things for this young man.
Who's that young go-getter in Section G? Oh, that's Homer Simpson.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is because I got a kick out of this story that just came out about NASCAR. NASCAR hasn't had what you would expect given big data numbers this year. It seems to have struggled. So they're basically saying, screw big data. We're going back to the old system for the rest of this year until we can sort this shit out. Because they're getting hit up while all these other sports are, and they're up for the same advertising dollars that everybody else. They have to think long-term about their rights deals and so forth. So they feel, and some of this could be true with the way smaller markets are located, where NASCAR does really well in the smaller markets that are kind of on the bottom part of, say, the top 25 or top 50 markets. So I get why they're doing it, because they're kind of getting hurt by this, but they're down compared to where they were. And they did an analysis of if we use the old system versus the big data system, and they were up and they're like, we're using that system. We're going away from it. So we'll see what discussions they have after the season's over with Nielsen.
I'm always reminded by what our past guest, Mark Lazarus, said about ratings. We'd all love to be able to grade our own homework. And that appears, at least on the surface, what NASCAR is doing at this point.
And, listen, it's a big weekend. This is the biggest motorsports weekend in the States with the Indy 500 running, and then the Coca-Cola 600. We'll talk about this a little later. Normally, the Monaco Grand Prix would be running as well, but it's not this year. They're moving that date so as not to necessarily compete with the Indy 500. The Canadian Grand Prix will be running this weekend, and that's kind of a bummer in a way. But speaking of Formula One, and speaking of grading your own tests, Apple's not even releasing numbers on Formula One. They're just saying they're going great. And I think they did that with MLS as well. And as long as I guess they're happy with the business. No, they weren't going great in terms of the normal things you look at with viewership. But I suspect they may be happy with that. So I think coming off of that racing talk, we will take a break. We have a very interesting guest coming on to continue some chat about the world of motorsports, but in a very unique way. So we will be back on the other side.
It's time for our guest.
Historically speaking, Memorial Day weekend is the biggest motorsports weekend of the year, with the running of both the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 600, and usually the Monaco Grand Prix, but no longer, unfortunately. So Tim and I felt it would be the perfect time to get Emmy and Peabody Award-winning documentary filmmaker Cynthia Hill on the show to discuss her latest film. Kyle Larson versus the Double documents NASCAR star Kyle Larson's attempts at successfully completing the elusive double, running in both the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 in a single day. It debuts on Prime Video Thursday, May 21st, the same day this episode will be live. Cynthia is known and respected for crafting character-driven, visually rich stories that explore the complexities of life in the American South. A few of her impressive credits: Cynthia is the director and producer of the HBO documentary series Burden of Proof and the Sundance premiering feature Private Violence. Her credits also include directing the HBO Max series What Happened, Brittany Murphy, and co-creating and directing the PBS series A Chef's Life and Somewhere South. Her work spans domestic violence, immigration, food culture, and NASCAR, often challenging oversimplified narratives and revealing deeper emotional truths. Prior to Kyle Larson versus the Double, Cynthia directed Road to Race Day, an 8-part docuseries offering access to Hendrick Motorsports' 2016 drivers and teams. Cynthia, welcome to Wait What?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Listen, I have to start this way because we've had multiple guests from various ACC schools. So I went to Wake Forest. I want to say that. I know you're a Carolina Tar Heel.
Yes.
And Tim went to Cornell. We've had several Duke alum as guests on this show. Tim went to Cornell proudly, but for some reason he's a Carolina fan, and I'm happy that he finally gets somebody that he can share that passion for, because normally the Duke guests that we have are like, what happened to you, man? Like you're from Long Island, you went to Cornell, and you're a Carolina fan. So anyway, I just wanted to clear the air there.
Happy to have you.
I knew
Tim.
I liked you, Cynthia.
Well, I went
All
to
right.
pharmacy school at UNC, so I'm sort of an oddball.
And now look at where you are. Well, let's go ahead and get started. As a filmmaker, not a
Yes.
pharmacist, but as a
Yes.
filmmaker, what made Kyle's pursuit of the double a story worth telling, and why did you want to tell it?
Well, the first thing is they called and asked me if I wanted to film it. So that's the key. You know, as you were saying, I had this previous relationship with Hendrick Motorsports when I filmed with them for the 2016 season. And I guess I must have left with them still liking us. Sometimes you film with folks and you may wear out your welcome, but we did not, thank goodness. They called and asked if I had any interest in potentially documenting this process of Kyle doing the double. And I'll be honest with you, the first thing I had to do was Google the double because I didn't know what that was. So once I figured out what it was and understood the magnitude of this feat, and also really kind of got a better understanding of Kyle Larson and, you know, who he is in the racing world and how well regarded he is and the talent there, it was for me really a no-brainer to go on this journey with him. Like, who wouldn't want to go on this journey? And the biggest concern for me was whether or not Kyle really wanted us on this journey with him, you know, because sometimes other people have an idea of like, oh, this would be amazing. But if the person that is the main subject has no interest in that, then it's going to suck for everybody involved. But early on, he and I had a really good conversation about the process and my process of really embedding with the subjects and being there for moments that may be uncomfortable, those unpolished moments. And he was down for it. He said, yeah, I really want people to see what goes into this. I'm super excited to be able to have this opportunity, and how incredible would it be to share this? And so from there on out, it was like let's go do it. So we just started filming.
You spent a significant amount of time with Kyle and his family, his team, over the course of 2 seasons. You just mentioned the fact you didn't really know what the double was. How did your view of the double change over time as you were making the documentary?
I don't think I really understood the logistical challenges. And I really didn't, I don't think, comprehend the physical challenges. And then the emotional challenges of it all, became more revealing as we're in this process, and just the toll that something like this takes on you. And for someone like Kyle, who is touted as possibly being the best driver in the world and the wheelman, and all the pressure that puts on you. And he just loves to race. Anything, anywhere. He just wants to race. So him putting himself in this position for this pressure in all those different ways, I didn't know to appreciate that until we got into it, and then seeing all of that reveal itself through the filming process.
There's a scene towards the beginning of the documentary of Tony Stewart being loaded into an ambulance after his attempt to do the double several years before. And so to your point, the physical exhaustion these drivers must feel for even attempting it is incredible.
He did condition for it, but I think he's already conditioned for it because he races so much, more than I would say, especially most NASCAR drivers. He is on a dirt track or racing some other kind of contraption 3, 4, 5 days a week.
And this is not a knock, because I love Smoke. I was always a Tony Stewart fan, but Kyle's definitely in better shape than Tony Stewart ever was.
And probably had some different meals before the actual race.
But kind of going on that, the title of the film is Kyle Larson versus the double.
Yeah.
Suggesting that he's going against some elusive, like mythical, venture that he's trying to, win over. Like it's competition. It's him versus it. Why did you and your team feel like that was the appropriate title here?
I think ultimately, because there are a lot of titles that were floated, that really became the most fitting title, because that's what it is. He is going against the idea of it, the actual feat of it. And, ultimately, I think the double may have won in both years, but it seemed to be the most fitting title. And I don't know, it said a lot, I think. And that's what you look for in a title, especially when you may be struggling with people not knowing what the film is about. You try to get something in there that explains pretty quickly what someone's going to be watching.
One scene that was particularly compelling was when you showed Kyle's NASCAR team cheering during the Indy 500 qualifying. And it seems like everybody who was within Kyle's sphere was excited for him, was behind the effort. Do you agree with that? Did you see anything that led you to believe there were some people who were questioning the decision to do the double?
Well, I tried to get somebody to tell me that, but nobody would say that. I don't know if there was some deep, dark concern from folks maybe within the organization, but no one seemed to display that. Everybody was just so excited for this opportunity. And, the cost of it, there were a lot of costs associated with these attempts, the monetary, the cost of the points, for the Coke 600 and that first year, and what did that really do for the championship? There's still debate about that, so, but no one ever expressed that.
Yeah, it was fascinating because during it, Jeff Gordon, who played such a prominent role in the film, and obviously was someone that Kyle, if not idolized, obviously was kind of the person that he looked up to the most, because Gordon was that type of race car driver as well. Grew up, actually moved from California to Indy, and so he had all those potential experiences, loved sprint cars, etc. So I thought I was always kind of trying to figure out, what's Jeff really thinking here? Does he just wish this was all over? But that calls to mind a very important scene where Gordon, Rick Hendrick, the owner of Hendrick Motorsports, and Kyle are called to a meeting. Now, I don't know if you know how you pulled that off. Anyway, it seemed like an important thing where Hendrick sits down, who seems to me to be the guy that could say, let's not ever bring this up again, goes, I think we have some unfinished business. I want to try this again. Had Hendrick not said that, had Rick not gone there with Kyle, would he have ever even attempted it in 2025?
There was a 2-year agreement in place initially. So there was that opportunity, but there was a very sour taste, I think, in a lot of folks' mouths when the idea of, are we going to do this again, was, well, I don't think it was discussed initially. From what I was getting from the grapevine and from Mr. H was that people just weren't even talking about it. And so it was not a foregone conclusion whatsoever that Kyle was going to be able to do it again. I think everybody was pleased that it was going to happen again, but I think a lot of conversations were had behind the scenes before we were allowed to be there in that moment, for sure.
Switching gears a little bit, no pun intended, during the COVID lockdown in 2020,
It does feel that long.
yeah, that's how it feels. Larson and a number of other NASCAR drivers were participating in e-racing competitions.
Yeah.
And you address this head on in the documentary. Kyle was punished, for lack of a better term, for a racial epithet that he said. Why was it important for you to tell that story as part of the documentary? I mean, you address it head on.
For me, I think as a storyteller, you try to paint a complete picture. And once the film became something other than just this specific event of the double, and it was more of a biopic, then it had to be his whole story. That was fair game. And especially that moment, it was such a pivotal moment in his life. And I think there were a lot of lessons learned in that it was definitely something that had to be addressed.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how much of that type of stuff. Tim mentioned the family aspect and there's obviously all kinds of footage from when he was young. There's the discussions with his wife. There's Owen. My gosh, that moment where Owen says, Dad doesn't get to many of my races anymore. That was heartbreaking to hear him say that, but they owned every minute of it. And I think going back to the point about Kyle having to deal with that and never suggesting for a moment, and whether in this documentary or anything I've ever read, where Kyle has blamed anyone for that other than himself for what transpired. So for that, I have a good amount of respect for him and kind of earning and clawing his way back into the sport on his talent and drive. British race car driver Katherine Legge is going to attempt the double this year. She's not as well known in American racing circles, certainly, as Kyle, but has experience across a number of different formats. As somebody that kind of lived with someone going through this for 2 years, any advice you'd have for Katherine on what she should, keep her eye on and how she should focus her attention attempting this weekend?
I was thinking early on when I caught word that she might be doing this, I was like, somebody needs to send her a screener copy of this film. I think it's a lot of it, I think, is luck. And you can be accomplished and you can drive your ass off, and a lot of it just is out of your control. So I think that that's kind of part of it, is just being able to be okay with that. And I'm so excited that she's doing this, having a woman attempt this. And I think she's got a good chance of completing both of them. And I'm assuming, and I might not be assuming correctly, but the points in NASCAR and those issues don't seem to be relevant for her. So I don't think she has the same pressure that Kyle had, or the same concerns. So I think that that's probably helpful for her.
So You grew up in North Carolina. We mentioned that this is not your first film on motorsports. You followed Hendrick Motorsports around for some time. Two-part question. What is it about elite motorsports that you find compelling as a subject? And then the second part of the question is, do you consider yourself a motorsports fan? And depending on what your answer is, does that hurt you or help you in your filmmaking? Don't ask me to repeat it because I'm not going to remember it.
Okay, first part. You're in the South, and NASCAR is all around you. And I grew up in rural North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, and every Sunday dinner that we went to at my granddad's house, the race was always on. Well, when it was a race day, which was most Sundays. So he was a diehard Richard Petty fan, and therefore, I was a Richard Petty fan when I was young. So it just was a part of the fabric of our state and the South. And so I've always been fascinated by it and fascinated by, the fan base and the history of it. And so for me, it was kind of a no-brainer to try to tell a story in this field. And I think for me was, again, dispelling some of the myths around motorsports and especially like the Ricky Bobby assumptions of what drivers are like and the teams are like. And so I'm always for trying to make sure people don't stereotype Southerners and especially our culture and our sports or whatever. So telling a NASCAR story was important to me. And Hendrick was, why not go to the top? And so Hendrick was willing to let us in there for that. Am I a motorsports fan? I would say that it just depends on what race. And I do enjoy it, but I'm also someone that enjoys filming from within. So being just a plain old spectator is different for me. I really like being in the bowels of it. And so it's just such a different experience. And I really enjoy that. And I really enjoy being at a race and filming a race and getting all of that energy and the behind the scenes commotion. There's nothing better than that for me.
Before David goes to his next question, I have a quick follow-up. David, I think I can speak for you. When we go to sporting events as sports marketers, we're always looking at who's got signage, who's got promotions going on, what sponsors are doing, so forth. Cynthia, when you go to, if you're watching a race, whether in person or on TV, but you're not working, are you thinking about how you would film or what story you would like to capture while you're watching an event?
My brain does work like that, unfortunately, about most things. It's like it automatically goes to what's the story here. So I am sort of plagued with that. Can I just go somewhere and just enjoy something without thinking about how to approach it as a story? Typically not.
I'm sorry to say this, but we're glad you're that way because that's how good filmmaking and just, for us in this business to be able to see, and we've had a couple other documentary filmmakers on, and we just love these conversations because it's new to us, but telling these great stories of these sports that have been part of our lives as business people for so long, and then kind of getting behind, as I said earlier, kind of learning something new and seeing it. So we're happy that's the way your brain is wired, Cynthia, I have to say.
My children, not so much.
We're close to our two closing questions, but before, and once again, the film is Kyle Larson versus the Double. It premieres on Prime Video on this Thursday, May 21st. And I can say this, I encourage anybody that is ever even thought about being a fan or is a fan of particularly NASCAR, but of motorsports, this is a worthwhile thing to watch. Okay, but we also want to give you a chance to talk about anything else. What's next for you? Anything that you're working on right now or want to talk to our listeners about?
I'm not sure if you want to open this can of worms. I have been filming with Bigfoot hunters in the Ozarks for the last 3+ years, 3.5 now. So it is I love the frozen
No,
screen.
this is the second Bigfoot reference that's happened in the last week for me, and I'm not going to tell you about the first one.
No, when is it coming out? I want to see it.
I don't know. It's a project that doesn't have a home. It's just a personal project that I've been working on with another filmmaker. I keep calling it a relationship film because it's all these up and downs and the dynamics of the people in front of the camera, the people behind the camera. And so the working title I have for it so far, and we're talking about titles, so bookending this is Bigfoot and Other Things Worth Finding. So it opens up the door for a lot of discovery.
So it's an inappropriate time for me to say I thought that was settled information, that Bigfoot is not a thing, but maybe it's not. I guess maybe it's not.
Maybe
We'll have to
not.
watch. We can't thank you enough for your time, but we have 2 questions that we ask all our guests. So if you don't mind, we'll ask you those before we let you go. First one is,
Where'd your career get started? Where'd you start?
how did you get your start in the film industry?
This is another one that maybe you don't really want to know. I was at UNC pharmacy school, and I was a bartender at the time it was the 𝘊𝘺𝘯𝘵 Hotel. It's the Sheraton now. And this film crew from California was doing an episode of Rescue 911. I don't know if you remember that show in the 90s, the early 90s. They took a liking to the sound man that was one of the crew members, and he took a liking to me. And I went out to LA that next summer and became a filmmaker, of course. So that's my story.
When you say early 90s, as though you're not, I don't know if you guys are going to remember that. That's like very recent history for us. So
Exactly.
And then the last question, what one piece of advice would you have for somebody looking to break into your industry?
Don't. No, I take that back. I think for this, because like most things that are worth doing, they're just hard. It's difficult. And if you really want it, you have to work hard for it, and you better be very passionate about it, because a lot of times it's that keeps you going, because you get a lot of no's in this industry, and you got to work around those. And I used to say, and I probably should go back to saying this to myself, is that when I get a no, it means I haven't asked the right question. So I don't take no very easily. So I think you have to be like that.
I have to ask, what happened to the sound man?
That didn't last, but
you
Okay,
had
well,
to go there.
From small things, mama, big things one day come.
exactly. I was like, I'm a believer in just like, following whatever's in front of you, and you just never know when the opportunity is there. Take it.
Cynthia, we can't thank you enough. Again, Cynthia Hill, Marquee Media, North Carolina Tar Heel, director, producer of Kyle Larson versus the Double on Prime Video. We appreciate the insights. We appreciate your filmmaking, and I look forward to catching not just the Bigfoot program when it comes out, but some of your other programming as well. So thank you. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. This was super enjoyable. I appreciate it.
So I have to admit, I love talking to filmmakers. As you've mentioned many times on this show, sports is the ultimate reality show, and getting even more inside the emotion of what is happening, to me, that's always exciting. So thank you again to Cynthia Hill for joining us, as I'm sure she's busy with media rounds in preparation for the launch of Kyle Larson versus the Double on Prime Video. So now is the time of the show where we give shout outs, we make corrections, we talk about things that we want to be following. So Tim, what do you have your eye on?
So a couple things. One, I want to send out best wishes to Super Agent Tom Condon, a true legend in our industry. He's battling some health issues, what is known as normal pressure hydrocephalus, where basically you get spinal fluid that backs up into the brain cavity. It's what Billy Joel has, and that's causing some challenges for Tom Condon, so best wishes for him. Also, looking forward to Airbnb. We are going to have a return guest who works at Airbnb, but was not with Airbnb when he was with us the first time. I will leave it at that. He's coming on in the next week or two. But Airbnb announced that they have done a sponsorship deal with 5 NASCAR tracks throughout the Southeast, trying to get a bigger presence in some of the Southeast markets. So things like, I think they are at Darlington, I think they are in Martinsville, a couple of other markets in the Southeast. So we'll be able to talk to our guests in a couple of weeks about what goes into that. What about you, partner?
Yeah, and we are getting close to the time where with our guests we may be focusing on FIFA World Cup a bit for a while because we are 23 days out as of this recording anyway, I think. Well, obviously, I am looking forward to catching a lot of racing. Normally, I would be very excited about the Monaco Grand Prix. I will watch Montreal, which is actually one of my favorite F1 circuits. So there will be that. And of course, catching what I can of the Indy 500 and Coke 600. It looks like 𝘊𝘺𝘃𝗀𝘃 of Chip Ganassi Racing is the odds-on favorite for the Indy 500 to repeat. So yeah, just a great motorsports weekend, which is why it was great to have Cynthia on. I'm pretty jacked up about the NBA play. I'm getting more and more jacked up about it, not just because of the numbers that they're putting up, but just these 4 teams left and what it means. And, you know, New York is always kind of a cooler place when one of the teams is battling for a championship, right?
Yeah.
And so I am excited about that tonight.
Even in a city like New York, you can feel the energy around town.
Yeah, it's crazy. And in a city like New York with so many different things to do, where the percentage, we had Jennifer Van Dyke on, who's launching the Boston legacy of NWSL, and Boston is a much more concentrated, higher penetration sports city than New York, except at times like this where the energy just gets super cool. So I am excited about that. Did you just hear that Carlos Alcaraz is already pulled out with this nagging wrist injury he has of Wimbledon? That must be a pretty damn serious injury. He's already pulled out of the French. So, I mean, he's a big factor in the sport of tennis right now. And you know, I'm wondering how serious this may be. I just saw that before we started recording, that he's out already. I mean, this is over. It's about a month away before Wimbledon opens. So,
yeah,
that's pretty serious. The big story that I'm watching, especially with NFL in meetings right now, and I'd like to see some development on what's going on in the Bears Stadium situation. But this potential reopening of the media deals that they're looking at, and whether this could finally be the time that the NFL goes. I don't think so, by the way, but do they go a little too far in playing cute and getting more people involved, and knowing that the streamers, particularly these tech-based companies, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, that have such bigger market caps than the traditional, you know, Fox and CBS and NBC say, and what this could mean.
Also, just so you know, they have dual revenue streams too, because not only do they get advertising dollars, they get subscription money as well, which ESPN can do, but the broadcast networks, the traditional NBC, Fox, ABC, CBS cannot do that. Yeah, you can put it on Paramount, but
you know, these are $11 to $12 billion deals annually across all these different partners, and they're bringing more people in. Is there a point where that finally snaps back? Obviously, everybody wants a piece of the NFL. It is the premier content. This will be an interesting one to watch to see how Goodell plays this. Does he actually opt out of those deals? Because the NFL has the opt-out on those. They're in place through 2032, I think. So it's not like they're ending tomorrow, but they could, you know, reopen that up. And what does that mean, particularly for CBS? I think will be in the toughest position probably to renew. But you know, Fox is going to Washington, D.C. and pleading its case now. I mean, granted, they're coming at it from a selfish, you know, it's just as selfish a reasoning as everybody else would, but he kind of has a point. And if it all ends up on streamers, you are paying additional to be able to get all that programming. And how much fragmentation could there be? Anyway, big story, something that'll be kind of fun to follow. I have one more thing I have to add to it. I wasn't going to say this, but I have to add. I wrote to past guest Ted Dalton just to say, hey, by the way, you got a cool shout out from Jennifer on the show last week. And he said, yeah, I'm having lunch with her today. And of course, I then took credit for the fact that we brought them back together to have lunch. Of course,
they've known each other forever.
thing. What? Of course. No, I'm not saying I brought them together. Of course, they knew each other.
Okay.
But I was like saying, yeah, you guys, because the mention on the show, you guys scheduled lunch, which of course wasn't true either. And Ted said, yeah, you guys are bridge builders. And so I just thought I had to say that. All right, I'll stop. That's it.
You sure he didn't say something like you guys should get into a different field like bridge building?
No, yeah. Shit, I think that is what he said. But that was great. Two like amazing people that have been longtime friends. Anyway, I get excited when one guest mentions another person that was a past guest, as we can see from last week's episode. All right, that's it for episode 155. Big thanks again to Cynthia Hill, director and producer of Kyle Larson versus the Double, premiering on Prime Video. I encourage anyone to watch it that has any sort of passing interest in the world of motorsports. Tim, thank you to you for a great discussion as always. Mostly thank you to you, the listeners. We appreciate any time you spend with us, of course. So make sure any opportunity you get to hit that like button, share us, follow us, take advantage of that opportunity. It would be much appreciated. And of course, engage with us on LinkedIn, which is our primary social media platform. And you can catch our other content at dpandmcgee.com. So with that, until next time, I'm DP, he's McGee, and we'll talk soon.